This is a part 1 video about growing seeds. So if you've had trouble germinating and sowing seeds from scratch, then this is the video for you. And the reason it's a part 1 was because this one is just about the seed packet and what to look out for even before you buy your first seeds to sow. And then in part 2, I will go into more detail about the actual process of sowing the seeds in once you've got them home, once you've got that seed packet home. Okay, right, so before I get into it, just don't forget to subscribe, like, click the notification bell and comment with your experiences as well below. It's important to share your experiences as well. And then let's get into it. So tip 1, usually on the bottom, at the front of the packet or at the back of the packet, usually, as I say, again on the bottom, but you may have to look elsewhere, you need to find the expiry date. Without an expiry date, you don't know how long these seeds have just been sitting around waiting for somebody to buy them. And the older the seed is, the less viable it is. But also, that aside, you don't know how long this seed how well this seed has been looked after. This packet of seeds has been looked after in storage. It could have been wet, it could have been dry, it could have been stood on, it could have been dropped on the floor and trampled on for several days. You just don't know. So the longer it's been out and is past its expiry date, the less viable the seed is. Without that expiry date, you have no idea what the condition of this seed is, and seeds are expensive. So if a packet doesn't have an expiry date on it, and some don't but most do, then don't buy the packet of seeds. In some cases, you will even get when it was packed, when the seed was collected and packed, which is obviously even better because that just gives you even more information about how fresh your seeds are. The other reason you want to know the expiry date is because you might not want to sow all your seeds in one go, and you want to know that they're still going to be viable if you come round to sowing some more next year, or if, say for instance, if you succession sow, you want to know that these seeds are going to be viable throughout the period that you're going to want to be sowing them. And so that is why my tip number 1 is look for the expiry date. Top tip number 2, check the quantity of seeds. Now, some speciality seeds are expensive and you're only going to get a few in them. And I would count something like a speciality snapdragon as something that's probably not going to have that many seeds in it.
Look, 20 seeds.
Now, if you are a beginner grower, you really don't want to be taking chances on a speciality seed where you've only got 20 seeds and you don't have any experience of growing this particular plant. Because, say for instance, let's take the snapdragon as an example. There are all sorts of different snapdragons that thrive in different periods of the year. So there are cool season snapflowers and there are summer snapdragons. And if you're a beginner, you might not know all these sort of variables. So you go along, you buy your seeds. Oh, beautiful picture of snapdragons. I'm taking these. You get them home and you realise there's only 20. Now, you may not even realise that that is quite a low amount of seeds. So you plant them up, but you don't know what you're doing. And you've planted cool flowers in the heat of the summer and nothing grows. Well, first of all, if you ever do that, just leave them because they will germinate when the conditions are right. So don't be tempted to just throw them out. It just means you've planted them at the wrong time of year. That will bring me to tip 3. But let's just stick with tip 2. If you are a new grower, I would go for something less speciality. So just get a regular common or garden snapdragon variety from a big brand supplier and check the quantity of the seeds. You're going to want to have a decent amount of seeds to give you some room for error. And so my tip 2 would be check the quantity of the seeds and avoid speciality versions of your plant until you know what you're doing. Then you can, when your skills are more honed, you can start splashing out on speciality varieties of whatever it is you like to grow. Top tip number 3. On the back of the seed packet, it'll tell you to sow in March or sow between March and April or this, that and the other. And that's just a general view of when you should generally be sowing your packet of seeds. But as anybody who watches YouTube videos knows, people can grow these flowers or products and vegetables in all sorts of different climates. How does that work then? Because not everybody's May is the same. So in the UK, we have a very temperate climate, and March can be quite balmy. It can also be really cold. It's quite variable. March in Canada, in some parts of Canada, is going to still be really far too cold to be starting seeds. So how is it then that we all are able to grow some of the same flowers and products and vegetables? Well, because we look at the temperature. So instead of looking at the range of when you should be growing, which is just an average and it's just a general growing guide and it doesn't really help you, what you need to be looking at is the temperature. That way you can plan sowing your seeds, especially if you don't have a greenhouse or any way of growing them indoors. You can then follow the weather forecast in your area, get to know your local climate conditions, and you can estimate when you can grow the seeds according to the temperature. So recently I just started some seeds that you would normally grow in July, start in July or August, and I left them as late as September and even early October because we are having an Indian summer in the UK. So I was able to check the weather forecast and the temperature, and I realised that the temperature for the next few weeks was going to be good and sufficient for starting these seeds and getting them off to a good start to overwintering. Now, I wouldn't recommend you starting seeds if it's just a warm couple of days and then you're going to go back to the frost again, because the plant is not going to be able to deal with that. I started these because I knew we had several weeks of an Indian summer and that the plants were going to be absolutely fine and quite well established by the time the weather starts to turn for autumn. So that is why temperature is more important than what it says on the back, start in May, start in October, start whenever. Look at the temperature, then check your own local climate conditions. Tip number 4, check if your plant that you want to grow is an annual or a perennial. Now, there are even further breakdown categories of annuals and perennials, but for this video, I'm keeping it simple. When deciding what to grow, do you want to grow flowers that you're going to be growing every year? You're going to have to start every March or every April or, every July. You're going to have to be growing them every year because they once they've flowered, they're just going to die back. That's what an annual does. An annual only grows for one season. It'll set seed, and if you're lucky, it may self-seed and spring up new flowers the next year, but quite often they don't either, which means you are going to be bound by sowing them every year if you want the same flowers. Now, if you're growing vegetables or market produce, lettuce, salad, cabbage crops, etc., then you're probably just going to have to accept that you're going to have to be sowing all the time anyway, and you're just going to have to hone your sowing skills because obviously you're going to eat the produce, so you need to start growing more every year. But if you really are just growing a garden and you haven't got a lot of money and you want some really beautiful plants and you know that it would cost you an absolute fortune to buy those plants grown in the garden centres, then you can grow perennials from seed. So whilst perennials sometimes take a bit longer, not always, they will reflower and regrow every year, or maybe even not even regrow. They may just establish as a shrub. So such as lavender is a good one for that, and salvia. And these, and also the big sort of cottage garden herbs such as rosemary. You can grow all these from seed, and then you'll have them for a long time instead of having to sow them. Then you can concentrate your sowing skills on some other product. But things like lavender, I find actually when they are sown at home, they're actually better anyway. They take longer, yes, than the ones you buy in the shops, but they actually establish better. I've always found that the end result product, the plant, is much better quality when it's grown at home from seed. So on that note, just check your packet. Is it a perennial or an annual? You need to know that. And then tip number 5 is to just check all the other general characteristics. And probably the first thing you would actually do is look at the picture, if there is a picture on it, and think, oh, I want to grow that. But, you know, do check all the other characteristics, the height, for instance, that it grows. Because if you have, say, for instance, a small low growing pot that you want at the front of a border, you don't want to be growing a plant that's going to grow 1 to 2 meters tall. Things like that are just really important. If colour is important to you, then obviously be sure that the colour scheme is going to work. And ditto with obviously vegetables and stuff. Where have you got the room to grow these plants? Especially seeds that germinate in huge quantities. You know, are you germinating seeds that you haven't even got room for? So just think about all that before you waste your money, because seeds are expensive. You know, they can be £3 or £4 a packet, and that's a lot of money to just blow away on some unviable seeds, or some seeds that you don't know what you're doing, and you've just bought 20 speciality seeds and not one has germinated. So that's my first video really on to have success with seeds, is really to just start with the seed packet before you even purchase the seeds. Just really study it, have a look. You know, bear in mind there are other factors, and that the information they have to give you on the back of the packet is quite general, and you may need to understand a little bit more than that to have some success. So that's my first video on success with seeds. I hope it helped. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you'll be notified when I post that one. Thanks for watching.